boyfriend. Teenage love. Written by Vella Jamar. Narrated by Deja, Nance. Chapter 16. Our girls' club that we started in the summer was dissipating, and Kathy was fed up scheduling meetings where she was the only one present. She was a woman who had things to do. On a few more broken engagements after we promised not to do it again, she called it quits. We begged her all to no avail to keep it going. Her mind was made up. With the remainder of monies left from our fundraisers, Kathy packed a big picnic basket, and we went to Great America to have some good old-fashioned fun. She brought both of her kids, and her mother volunteered to help drive so everyone could go. Kathy could stretch $1 out of 15 cents single-handedly. We ate before entering, and each time we got hungry throughout the day, we found Kathy, got the keys, and ran back to the car to stuff our faces. We had a wonderful day and tried to enjoy every ride in the park. We played a few games but didn't like losing money, so we stuck to the free rides. We had a good time and stayed until closing. We then gathered in the 2 cars and rode back home from our last outing together. Diana lived a couple blocks away from her, and each time we passed, how we longed to have our club back. We had a lot of fun with Kathy. She was a very unique lady who would go on to become another influential person in my life. She was a precious gem, and I was very glad that our paths had crossed. I don't know what in the world I would have done without all of her free advice and countless words of wisdom over the years. Diana and I were really enjoying 12th grade and found ourselves at the pizzeria one night putting together pizzas to raise funds towards senior activities. We had fun fulfilling different ones ordered. We sprinkled more cheese and meat on the ones requested by people we liked. We saw Marcus's older brother, Charles, in the kitchen talking to management. It seems like he was there to pick up his paycheck. He didn't stay long. After we greeted each other, we pointed to Raymond, who was in the crowd of noisy students. He went to acknowledge his little brother while we got back to making pizzas. It was a joyous event. That must have been the same pizza parlor Marcus worked at. Sometimes he'd flash a wallet full of money in my face, bragging about him and his friends punching each other's time card when they weren't working, causing their check to be bigger than it was supposed to be. When we finished our shift in the kitchen, we joined the crowd and had fun socializing with our peers as different ones kept running to drop a quarter in the jukebox, playing the latest tunes. As the night ended, we hopped in somebody's car and got a ride home. We had long outgrown walking and had become expert ride requesters. Diana and I were definitely a duo, but a girl named Sandra came to Harriel's her last year of high school and joined us sometimes. We befriended and hung out with her quite often during our final year. She had 2 younger sisters, one of which attended school with us. One evening we were going out and her cousins from San Francisco came, and we were ready to paint the town. They were a little older and didn't mind hanging out with us. It was a Friday night and they drove us straight back up to El Cerrito High School, where we enjoyed another football game. I don't remember seeing Olita that night. It was our homecoming game and all of the floats were being displayed from each class. At school that year, it was decided that a homecoming king, along with the homecoming queen, would be crowned as well. When the king was announced, he ran off of the football field in his dirty uniform and posed for a picture with the sharply dressed queen who had also been announced that evening. It was a most memorable picture in the yearbook. On Monday, I took my camera to school, and the ever-popular Herman and Charlie were sitting in the lunchroom after they gorged the lunchroom special. They had been best friends as far back as Downer Junior High. At times when it was actually a good meal served, some of the students, including Diana and myself, was still back in line to get seconds. Without warning, I snapped Charlie's picture. He stood straight up after he noticed the flash and came and told me that I actually needed his permission to take his picture. He had a sense of humor and plenty of girls were crazy about him. I told him that he was funny, put my camera away, and we both laughed. He loved playing basketball and had high hopes of joining the NBA. I took pictures all over the campus. When school was out, we were at the bus stop when Don asked if he could take a few shots. He was so silly with his cute self. He told Diana to be still so he could get a picture of her headlights, her big boobs, and then told me to turn around so he could get a picture of the bumpers, my butt, as I posed for him to get a good aim. We sat at the bus stop laughing as we waited for it to come and take us home. Diana and I didn't have sense enough to take our senior pictures over the summer and opted to take one for the yearbook. We lied saying that we were in the 11th grade since it was the closest to the 12th. We found ourselves milling around the photographer afterwards. I had fixed her hair that morning, and she was being flirted with throughout the day. Her hairdo looked really good. The photographer needed some assistance and asked if we'd mind helping. We weren't particularly interested in going to our next class and agreed. We punched out one of our 4 pictures for a file for school records and were instructed to throw the other ones away. Instead of trashing them, we kept the ones of the people we liked for our own scrapbook. I had already put together quite a few pictures over the years from my high school days. We had a ball laughing at some of the poses as we continued cutting them out. After school, we walked to her house and visited her neighbor who had mastered putting beads in people's hair, and she made an appointment to have her hair done. 2 of my classes were with Diana. The first one was sewing, and the last one was that icky American government. If one was late, so was the other, and the historical-looking government teacher had a sense of humor and made a habit of stopping class to make a spectacle out of us each time. We came in even a second after the bell rung, causing the entire class to get a good laugh as we hurried to our seats to shift the attention away from us. We struggled trying to get in there on time. When we didn't want to suffer the embarrassing moment, sometimes we skipped altogether. Later on that week, Marcus came over one evening and told me to grab some blankets. He and his neighbor, who was in the car, wanted to go get Diana and go riding. We picked her up and drove straight to North. Marcus didn't have any money and hardly any gas. As soon as we drove up, his grandmother came outside and demanded the keys. We went over his friend's house until we were kicked out of there by his foster mother. Diana and I were stuck for the evening. It was too late to call anyone to come get us, and the buses were no longer running. We weren't about to walk. Marcus went inside and grabbed some more blankets, as we all tried to keep warm in the cold car. His grandmother did not like it one bit. When she came out in the morning, she told Marcus that she did not like the fact that we had slept in the car. It doesn't look good to the neighbors. She lectured before getting in the car to go to work. We breathed a sigh of relief as we made our way inside the warm house, making ourselves at home. He had company in and out all day long, even when he went in to take a bath. They were all in there talking casually as he bathed. He asked me to come in and rub his back when they left. I stopped in for a hot minute and then rushed back into his room where Diana and I locked his bedroom door and started snooping through papers, finding all kind of love letters written by silly girls wanting his cheating behind. His play cousin David, who attended Richmond High, came over and asked for a ride to school. Marcus told him his grandmother had taken the keys and that he really could not take him. We hung out most of the day before finally hopping on the bus. David rode with us. I read one of the silly love letters one last time and handed it to him. His cousin had written it to Marcus. He snatched it and blurted, "Boy, you girls are so nosy." I don't know why he yanked it. I was nice enough to give it back to him and didn't have to. He didn't seem to appreciate our pesky selves. I don't know why we were some pretty nice girls most of the time. I got off the bus and went home. Diana stayed on a few more bus stops down and went home as well. I took a hot shower and caught up on some sleep. A few days later, Marcus came to my school in his sister's Volkswagen. I was walking down the hallway when I got a glimpse of the light blue bug leaving. Later, a girl named Pam stepped in front of me and said, "I just got out of the car with Marcus." She had a smirk smile on her face. She was one of Judy's friends and knew our relationship. She was obviously trying to make me jealous. She and Judy used to hang out, and the few times he visited her, she always told Judy so Judy could, in turn, tell me, of course. Her family also attended the same church as Marcus, which he hadn't been to in a while. The winter ball was approaching, and Marcus came flying over my house the Friday night before it was to take place the next evening and wanted to come together in his favorite pose. He claimed he was going to Fresno with his brother and family. I felt in my bones that he wanted to take someone to the ball and didn't want me to know. I guess you can say after a few years of knowing him, I developed ESP when it came to his tales. I had a feeling he was trying to use me, though that is what he had been doing all along. I refused all of his attempts to move us off the porch and to his stupid clubhouse that night no matter how much he pleaded. The feelings were deep down in my bones about my hunch of him taking someone other than me to the ball, and I stood my ground. He left disappointed and I went back in the house. The next day I told Diana my suspicions. She shrugged it off as another you and Marcus dilemma. On our way home from Saturday school at the college, we saw Pam on the bus coming from the mall with rollers in her hair. My suspicions were definitely confirmed. She and Diana talked at the rear of the bus. I'm sure she was anxious to tell Diana that she was going to the ball with my Marcus. I couldn't wait to get off that bus. Diana said she didn't say whether she was going to the prom or not. She didn't have to. I already knew. I went home and called Marcus' house 50 times throughout the remainder of the day. He never once answered, though he usually broke his neck to pick up the phone. I know his grandmother got sick and tired of me calling all day, but each time I did, she calmly replied, "No, he's not here." He must have prepped her. He had to have. She was well rehearsed. On the 51st time I caught her completely off guard when I asked instead, "Did Marcus go out of town?" I don't know," she responded. I knew for a fact that he did not go after that uncertain response. She had just given him away. He didn't prepare her for the actual lie he had told. It didn't occur to me to check with his brother to see if they were at least out of town. What a dog. I bet he was there each time I called, intentionally not answering the phone. My heart ached, and I went to bed with a very heavy heart. I managed to get to the next day. Diana and I were hanging out at my place, and all I could still do was think of Marcus. Diana and I started making phone calls. The only person I wanted to talk to was Marcus. I had her call him and took the receiver when he got on the phone. I asked how was Fresno. Fine, he lied. After small talk in a real sexy voice, I went into a trance and said, "Oh, Marcus, I want you so bad, baby. Please hurry up and get here." Excited, on fire, and glad that I wasn't mad at his lying black ass, he asked his grandmother if he could please use the car. "No," she said. He asked again. She again told him no. "Let me call you back," he said, and we hung up. I guess he thought he was going to work his magic on her. He was her favorite grandson, and I would come to find out later. Diana called a guy named Richard, whom I'd known since elementary. She apparently had been thinking about him and the charm he had propositioned her with over a year earlier when he and one of his friends came over her sister's house while we babysat her nephew. When she called him, he was knocked off his feet. He had been trying to get with her for at least a year. If I had known what a dog he would prove to be, I would have done her a favor and told her not to call him to prevent her from the heartaches and headaches that he would come to cause her. Oh well, I guess we all have to go through it at least once. I sure had my share with Marcus and still loved him to death. They talked briefly and arranged to speak at school the next day. Diana was one of the prettiest girls at Harry L's and chose one of the least attractive boys there to date. What made him appealing was his ability to be charming. One thing he did have going was his intelligence. I called Marcus back and asked to speak to him myself. His grandmother answered the phone and pretended to have hung up when he got on the other line. "I want you so bad, Marcus. Please come over, baby. I really, really need you." I talked sexy into the receiver again. He was hardening right through the phone wires. If I didn't have him any other way, I certainly owned him sexually. He couldn't get enough, even if he could get it from others. And that was a fact. He hollered out again, not realizing his Grams was still on the phone. "Big Amma, can I please use the car?" "No." She politely spoke into the receiver and burst into laughter at the sound of his whining and begging for the car. He yelled, "Big Amma, get off the phone." She hung it up giggling. He was frustrated that he couldn't use the car and accepted her no answer. He apologized he wouldn't be able to make it. He didn't want to walk the long miles that now existed between us. She usually gave him the keys to the Maverick. It was her second car, but not that night. We hung up and Diana called Richard back. I don't know what in the world she saw in him. When she took him home to meet her sister and her sister's fine-ass boyfriend, they laughed at the nerve of her bringing that boy home so bad I think they hurt her feelings. When she asked them what was so funny, she said they laughed all the more harder. I don't think anyone got it. At the time, she saw his inner attraction, which didn't last long at all. Once a male gets you where he wants you, all of his true features surface. She was very vulnerable. That was her first love, as Marcus was my first love. She was about to embark upon some of the same trips I'd gone through for the last 3 years. The very ones she couldn't relate to at the time, I was trying so hard to get her to understand. The following Sunday, Marcus came over and walked me to his mother's house saying he had something to show me. I wondered what. He refused to tell me. When we arrived, no one was there. Maybe they were all at church. He held me as he guided me to the bar and sat me down where the pictures of him and his prom date were laid out. My head dropped. He immediately apologized and said that he would take me to the senior ball as he picked my face up by the chin, pointing it into his lying brown eyes. He hugged me and apologized again, saying that she asked him to go and had offered to pay for everything. He said since he didn't have any money and had never been to one, he decided to take her up on her offer. He said after they took pictures, he wanted to leave and that she was mad because she wanted to show him and her dress off. Marcus looked very handsome in the picture with the wrong girl wrapped around his arms. None of that made me feel any better, but I guess I was glad that he had at least taken out the time to tell me, especially since he knew I was going to find out, being that we attended the same school. When we heard his sister Rachel's Volkswagen pull up in the driveway, we took off out the back door as we did each time. We heard someone coming the few times we went to his mother's house. He wanted to go to the clubhouse, but he knew that was the last place in the world we were going. Sure enough, the next day, she proudly passed out the wallet-sized picture of them at the prom to a few people we both knew at school. One common friend showed me as I braced myself not to tear it up. Marcus picked me up the following Sunday and drove me to North. Neither of his grandparents were home. A lot of people kept ringing the doorbell for him as he went in and out. I took the opportunity when he was out to sneak into his room and cut out one of the wallet-sized photos of them at prom and put it in my sock. I decided I would have some fun. He noticed one missing when he came back, and in a not-too-concerned manner asked where it was. I just smiled without answering. We sat down at the table and ate before he took me back home. The first thing I did was cut her out of the picture and went to show Judy's brother Alvin how handsome my boyfriend was. He looked at the cut-up picture and said, "But what happened to the other half?" I quickly explained I didn't like how I looked in the picture and so I cut me out. We cracked up so bad our stomachs hurt. As I showed everyone else in the house, I told the same story. We had ourselves a ball laughing at that one. Alvin said, "Oh, Marcus took someone else to prom, huh?" The next day at school, Pam had office duty, which meant running around doing errands for the counselor. It was a complete no-brainer class, but I guess somebody had to do it. I personally thought it was a waste of valuable time. It was the last period of the day, and me, Diana, and Judy had ditched. As Pam was going back inside of the office from one of her errands, I pulled out the picture and told Miss Bold-ass Diana to go and show it to her. She marched right inside and said, "Pam, look." I didn't hear any reaction, but when she came back outside, she said Pam had a look of shock on her face. She called Marcus on the phone and told him what I did. I don't know what in the world she thought he was going to do. I had grown bold over the years in our relationship. I was a long way from the introvert he first began dating nearly 3 years earlier. He came over a few days later showing off in his grandmother's big yellow car, nonchalantly inquiring the whereabouts of the picture before speeding off. He must have been running an errand for her. She didn't normally allow him to drive that particular car. Terry was my best friend in the 6th grade when we lived in San Jose. After 6 years of not seeing her, I still remembered her telephone number. I called her house one day and her mother said that she had just married and was having a wedding reception the following Saturday. I wanted to attend. I talked about going all week, and me and Diana made plans to go. First, we were going to catch the bus and train. Then I decided, why should we when my boyfriend was now equipped with a license and a car? On Saturday, we walked all the way to North Richmond so I could tell him that he was going to take us to the reception. When we arrived unannounced, he was caught off guard on just how bold I had become. He told us to go across the street for a minute to his friend's house that we had gone riding with weeks earlier. We did as instructed. 5 minutes later, he knocked and told me to come with him. We walked across the street towards his grandmother's house, hugging real tight, stopping in the middle of the street, embracing and kissing fervently underneath the streetlights. On the porch, we kissed passionately again. He looked at me starry-eyed as we lovingly cuddled. "I love you," he said, looking at me with his beautiful brown eyes. "I love you," I uttered back. We weren't having sex. What had gotten into him, I did wonder. My baby. He apologized that he would not be able to take us to San Jose. He and David had already made plans to go to the Gong Show. He invited me in, told me to have a seat, and formally introduced me to his grandparents. A few minutes later, Diana knocked on the door and joined us. His grandmother was a very friendly lady. His grandfather didn't say much, just sat in the rocking chair rocking back and forth. He was smiling as he walked to and fro, picking out what he was going to wear. He asked if we would like something to eat or drink. We said no. He then uttered, Okay, ladies, you must excuse me. I have to go and bathe. He took his bath with the door ajar, thinking we wanted to hear him sing. When his grandmother told him he couldn't sing, he sung all the more louder. We laughed as he continued exercising his vocal cords. A couple of weeks earlier, we had snatched a tape he said him and David had recorded a song on and refused to give it back. He in turn snatched Diana's pants that she was carrying that night in a little brown bag. When he got out of the tub, Diana asked, "Where are my pants, Marcus?" His grandmother inquired, "How in the world does he get a hold of y'all pants?" We all laughed again. She was very gregarious and loved to get her a good laugh in. Her house was so clean you could literally eat off the floor. She took great pride in the upkeep of both the inside and the out. I tried making conversation with her, geared toward her sewing skills Marcus once bragged about. She was totally lost as to what I was talking about and said that grandson of hers could really tell some lies. She had known him a lot longer than I, and it was apparent that she knew him quite well. He lied just for the hell of it. I still don't understand why. Marcus looked extremely handsome after he got all dressed up. He was as attractive as he used to look in his rust-colored outfit that he used to wear each Sunday several years earlier when we first began dating. He knew he looked good as he kept admiring himself in the bathroom mirror. He had a thing about sucking in his cheeks and staring at his reflection when he thought he really looked superior. David drove up in his mother's nice car. They thought they were too fine to drive the Maverick that night. When he knocked on the door and saw Diana and I, he wasn't happy at the sight of us and urged Marcus to, "Come on, man, let's go." We weren't about to walk all the way back to Central. I told Marcus we needed a ride, and we asked David if he'd take us home. He said he'd gladly drop us off. He'd won my honey for the night. They made us sit in the back while they rode up front. I leaned forward and lovingly rubbed on Marcus's chest as we drove home. I could feel the vibes coming right through the seat. When we got to my block, we exited the car and I told him goodbye in a very sexy voice. We went over Judy's house, and all Diana wanted to know is if anyone knew where a party was. We weren't able to find one and ended up hanging out there most of the night. Christmas was in the air. We saw Kathy one day as we were walking to Diana's house. She specifically looked at me and told me to be sure to come over and pick up my gift because she had something very special for me. It's as if we had been friends forever. She must have thought about singling everyone else out, and by the time I picked up my gift, everyone else from the girls' club had a pair of gloves exactly like the ones she gave me, only in a different color. I was so disappointed. I knew she had something other than those gloves. When I thought to ask her years later, our friendship proved eternal. She could absolutely not remember. At my French club, we were conducting a Christmas fundraiser, and I took my fundraising book to my Saturday course at the college. One of the teachers wanted to order a couple of items that totaled $20. The deadline was on Monday, but she promised to bring the money the following Saturday. When I told my French teacher, she was a little apprehensive because she had to front her own $20 in the meantime. She reluctantly went ahead and did so. The teacher at the college paid the following Saturday as promised. Between the time I received the money and the time I was to turn it in on Monday, Marcus came over that night as I was finishing up washing dishes. He motioned me to come outside. Diana and I had added a purse to our wardrobe that year. We sat in the car, and he looked at me strange holding a purse. He was probably wondering, was it really me? The same girl who had climbed fences with him over the years and even had the audacity to climb my 2-story house to get back inside a few times. He'd never seen me carry a purse. He must have figured there was money inside. Why else would I be carrying it? He must have thought to himself as he schemed how he was going to get it from me. Without really saying where we were going, he started up the car and began driving. He coincidentally ended up in the parking lot of the 40 Flags Motel with mirrors on the ceiling. We had heard other people talking about it from time to time. He parked the car and then looked at me and inquired, "How many snaps you got?" "None of my own," I replied as I held my purse closer. I explained the money I had belonged to my French teacher and that he was not going to get it. "Why are you here if you don't have any money?" I asked. "I'm not going to spend my teacher's money." We went back and forth about him borrowing the money, which he promised to pay back the next day. I don't know why I believed him, but I caved in to his begging. He had his license on him that night and hurried out of the car when I handed him the money to go check in. He rushed back flashing the key, a big smile, and quickly drove to the front of our very first motel room. He hurried out to open the car and motel door for me to enter. We finally made it. In our minds, anyway. No cold clubhouse or demand of snuggling up, dodging the raindrops that found every crack, or fear of someone going to catch us. He was ecstatic. To me, it was just another place to accommodate him sexually. Don't get me wrong. Though all of the sexual enjoyment was his, I thoroughly enjoyed being with him just in a non-sexual way all of the time. I got my pleasure from being with and wrapped in his strong, loving arms. I loved him and looked forward to the day he would love me in the same way. He was always more excited about sex than I was. As a matter of fact, I wasn't to a place where I was excited about it yet. Once inside, he checked out the surroundings, turned on the TV, and went crazy with the remote, switching from one channel to the next. He finally rested on one of the nasty movies. When he put the remote down, I changed it to something decent. He lovingly patted my hand, turned it back and said, "No, no, baby," and placed it out of my reach. We started kissing while rolling back and forth on the real bed. He tickled me wearing a bigger than usual grin as he kept looking around the room, still unable to believe we were there. And he kept looking up at those mirrors on the ceiling. "Let's take a shower," he suggested. I covered my hair so it wouldn't get nappy. I was pretty old-fashioned, still using a hot comb to straighten my hair. He undressed us as usual, perfected the water temperature, and we hopped in. We had been at it for almost 3 years, but it was strange seeing each other fully naked with the lights on. At the clubhouse, we undressed underneath the covers and didn't quite see all of each other's stuff. It was remarkable. We embraced and kissed passionately as the water dripped on us. It was our very first shower together, and we loved every wet minute of it. He soaped up very thoroughly. Then he soaped up again and again and again. He rubbed and washed so much, it looked as though he was going to wash away his beautiful walnut-colored skin. I never saw a person bathe so passionately. He sung as he continued washing off the dirt, even when there was no more dirt to wash off. He must have loved bathing. He acted like he didn't want to get out. He finally turned around and soaped me all around. I guess he thought I needed help. He washed me as if I was a small child in need of a parent's help taking a shower. We smiled every second while the water fell on us. When he got out, he turned on the heater and dried off. I continued bathing. Though I loved every minute he was in there with me, I now had more room to move about the narrow space. As I emerged, he had towels on the floor by the shower for me to step out onto. He then lovingly dried every drop of water from my body with the towel. He positioned it around my neck and gently pulled me toward him. We engaged in a deep kiss. He looked up toward the mirrors and at me again, moving us toward the bed so he could see us directly underneath. He was ready to get down to business, but I remembered lotion in my purse and placed it in his hand. He positioned me on the bed and lovingly massaged it into my legs, feet, and back. It felt so good. My baby. He then guided us to the front of the bed and pulled back the covers. He kept trying to look at those nasty people on TV and us in the mirror at the same time. He didn't know what he wanted to do. "I love you." He looked in my eyes and declared. "I love you," I responded. I was now used to expressing it back to him. "Marcus, I am tired, and I just want to be in your arms, and I'm not in the mood for sex." He totally ignored me and fluffed the pillows. He wasn't even trying to hear it the night at our very first motel. He laid us down and started making love. He kept trying to look upward and keep up with this heated passion at the same time. "Wow!" he screamed out, still getting a kick of looking at us in the mirror. He finally reached over, turned off the light, and pulled up the covers. We made beautiful, passionate love and then rested in the comfortable bed after he made his sounds of satisfaction. It had now been almost 3 years into our relationship, and I was still not making the hum of ecstasy that he seemed thoroughly pleased with. After he wiped away his drippings, we fell fast asleep. When we woke up the next morning, we made love again, trying to get every bit of the $20 worth of usage out of the motel. Neither one of us had any money for breakfast. We looked at TV and drifted back to sleep. A little before 11 o'clock, the maids knocked on the door to remind us that it was near checkout time. We drifted back under the covers, trying to savor every minute we had left with each other Before we were forced to depart our warm, comfortable room. We couldn't believe they wanted us to leave. Since neither one of us had another penny, we had to depart. I don't know why I felt a little guilty about explaining my whereabouts that day. We had been at it nearly 3 years at that point. I had him drop me off over my best friend Lorraine's house, which was located a few blocks away. We kissed goodbye as he reassured he was on his way to get my teacher's money, which his lying behind never did. I called home and tried to lead on as if I had spent the night at Lorraine's place. A day at Lorraine's was always a treat. I don't remember how I explained my nappy hair, which I got that way despite me covering it during the shower, but somehow I made it through the day without too many questions as to why I was in that state so early in the morning. I didn't tell them Marcus had just dropped me off from our night out at the lovely motel. We laughed about one thing or another the entire day. They were a family of 6, and each one of them had a keen sense of humor. Hanging out with them forced you to have your own brand of humor. They had their share of family feuds among siblings in those earlier days, but they still managed to function. Their mother was away a lot working to provide for her family and was very adamant about her house being in order when she walked through the door from whatever job she was working. Each one of her children understood her orders. She was one of those Texans who'd migrated to the Bay Area and brought her Texas discipline with her, passing it on to each of her offsprings. They always made you feel at home, and they always had plenty to eat in either the refrigerator or deep freezer. Her big sister was in love with the Spinner song called Sadie and played it at least 100 times that day. Each time it finished, she placed the needle back at the beginning and started over again. She must have thoroughly enjoyed the words that showed true appreciation of a mother's sacrifices in keeping her family together. It was a very powerful song which was later recorded by other artists. It was really blown away when Tupac Shakur took it to the microphone. That boy was bad. As night drew near, Lorraine, who was driving at the time, took me home. My teacher was furious Monday morning when I didn't have her money. I don't remember what lie I told, but I thought of one that held for a couple of weeks until I could get it. It was useless trying to get it from Marcus. The more I asked, the more lies he came up with. Some holidays, the sperm donor was hit by lightning. He came over a little before Christmas and gave everyone $100 bill, including me. Wow. Never mind needs in between holidays. Anyway, I was grateful. Judy's brother Alvin was always claiming to be some kind of a big-time pimp, though he very seldom had any money in his pocket to prove it. When he did have money, he went out of his way to flash it, showing everyone how rich he was at the moment. He was going to be the first one to see my $100 bill. I told everyone else I had it, but refused to let anyone see it until I showed him. Outside playing one day, he finally made his way over. He lived with his paternal grandmother. I hollered for him to come as I took the bill out of my sock so he could see it. He must have been broke that day, and upon seeing it, started chasing me, trying to take it. We wrestled as I held on to it for dear life. My mother opened the front door and he immediately let me go when he saw her. He said, "Aw, you finally got your first $100 bill. I get those all of the time." I don't know what in the world I was thinking. I quickly put it back in my sock and vowed not to do that again. It took too long to get it. After I had fun showing it off, I purchased some fabric so I could make some new clothes and gave my French teacher back her $20. She was very happy when I put it in her hand. Marcus came over and had the audacity to ask me what I was going to get him for Christmas. He still hadn't paid me back my teacher's $20. He quickly hinted that he liked the tune by Rod Stewart that went something like, "If you want my money, don't you think I'm sexy? Come on, baby, tell me so." He used to sing and dance to the tune, showing off his dance steps. With the little money I had left, I bought him the album. We had never exchanged gifts before. Diana and I wrapped up the Christmas vacation by going to a party to ring in the new year. I met a guy who was absolutely flattered with me at the party. At least that's how he was letting on. He kept asking me to dance and seemed very happy boogieing his sexy self all across the floor. He was the boyfriend of my neighbor from around the corner and would sometimes come to the girls' club with her when we had our meetings over Kathy's house. He always tried to talk to Diana behind her back. He was cute, though nowhere near as cute as Marcus. We were weary after an hour or so past the midnight countdown into the new year and decided to leave. He walked us a few blocks towards home and went on his merry way. Upon arriving at her sister's house, We noticed the door ajar. It looked as though someone had broken in, and Diana was terrified that they were going to come back. We went across the street to her grandmother's house and spent the night there instead. When we woke later that morning, we found out that her sister's boyfriend's wife was the culprit. We learned that they were all supposed to have gone out together and celebrate the incoming new year. I guess they decided to go without her, and she took out her frustrations and broke into the house. She cut up quite a few of Natasha's beautiful sweaters. What a woman will do to keep her man. I wish some husband I owned would have the audacity to arrange that we go out with his mistress. I'd have to plead insanity after I tore him apart. This has been Boyfriend, Teenage Love, written by Vella Jamar, narrated by Deja Nance.